increased between 2004 and 2009. China is getting richer. But we're still in a world where the overwhelming number of people in China are living in households, okay, they're smaller than Indian households, smaller than African households, perhaps 3 people, perhaps 2.5 people, some cases 2 people. They aspire to all the things that we aspire to. Those of us who've got sense and know that a Gucci belt is much better than an ordinary belt because it really shows your virility at the same time as holding your trousers up. They may aspire to it, but they can't afford it. And if you look at the pattern of demand in India, you see a similar story, although more extreme. Again, some sign of change, but I haven't got the 2 figures together. You will see it's over to the left of this. And again, most of the households in India, as in China, are households with low levels of family. Now, I'm going to come back to this later on. And you know the story of fortune bottom of the pyramid. And those, I mean, I do a lot of this, I'm African, right? I do a lot of this in Africa, and the African elite listening to my talk always says, but the trouble is Chinese products, they're rubbish. And there's a fascinating piece in an edition of the European Journal of Development Research, which I edited, on the impact of China on Africa, by a Cameroonian colleague who worked in casinos. And he wrote this piece on Cameroonian perceptions of Chinese prostitutes. And if you search and replace on this article prostitutes to manufacturers, you get exactly the same prejudices in Africa. The trouble with Chinese prostitutes, they're low quality, they don't last as long. Okay? They don't look as good. It's interesting stuff, because it's real ethnographic stuff. So, of course, everybody wants the brand image. Can they afford it? And my first point is that the real market opportunities out there, which the transnationals are seeing, they may see the desire for branded goods, but they know the real market opportunities are for people who just don't have the money to buy a Gucci belt, even though they may have large genitals. Okay, the second one is the global diffusion of innovative capabilities. I lean here on my friend Martin Bell. I'm sorry. I haven't got in this presentation, but I've got in a paper, the share of research and development occurring in the developing countries. Remember, it was 2% in 1970. I think, Martin, your figures are, I know it includes the former Soviet Union, 23% or something. But Luke Suti and Hollander have done a paper, it's in UNESCO, I'll give you the reference if you want it. They calculate between 22 and 25% of global R&D now occurs in developing countries. And that is made, R&D, as we know, is a very poor indicator of innovative capability. I'm talking about capability growth. And many people, many of the tacit skills, the Kaizen type activities, the incremental innovations, which are the real driver of innovation in many sectors, have been distributed widely as people around the world participate in global value chains. I've given you the global share of R&D, there we go. Education and training has grown significantly, and there's an increasing growth of large emerging country firms. Now, you can try any way you like to find a precise measure of this capability growth, but there's nothing better than just to go around the world and to see that all of our colleagues doing equivalent things in developing countries are at least as capable and at least as knowledgeable about the world as we do. I remember this came very graphically clear to me. I was working in the 1990s in an Indian firm called Crompton Greaves, which assembled electric motors and pumps and things. And that was when the internet first got to India. We were looking at the diffusion of Japanese manufacturing techniques. The managers of this Indian firm were much better informed about world-class manufacturing than the managers of the British firms and the local Sussex firms, which when I worked in Centrum, we worked in the pump cluster with local firms. There's this massive diffusion of capabilities around the world. So the potential, we've got this large market out there, which is a low and middle income market. We've got this massive diffusion of capabilities around the world, which is the second disruptive factor. The third one is, and here Carlotta and Luke Suti are both informative. We have a series of radical new technologies and which allow for distributed production. Martin, I think, and Norman were at a workshop we held here about 18 months ago on pro innovation. I always remember Luke's point, because I just put solar PV on my roof. And Luke was saying, well, how stupid that is. solar PV is ideal for distributed production and consumption. What happens to my solar PV? It goes back into the system and I buy it back again. We have a series of descaling technologies out there, mobile telephony, we've got renewables of various forms or another, which do not, in general, not always, they do not need, in many cases, the infrastructure of the old technologies. And we want to add to that, and there's some examples coming out of Susan Cousins in America, nanotechnology, and a couple of other technologies as well. So I think we have a series of technologies, and as you know, as Carlotta has spoken on these issues, but she believes that these distributed technologies, these new technologies really provide the scope for distributed production in Latin America in small-scale production ensembles, and I agree with that. So I would say that's a third disruptive feature, and the fourth one is that we have new innovators. Now, we have a variety of new innovators. We have, in addition to the transnationals, SMEs in the rich countries, we have now large firms in the developing countries, Tata, Huawei, what's the Chinese, Haier. Always love the story about Haier, now the largest white goods manufacturer in the world, was making washing machines, and when it sold it to rural areas, they realized that poor people in rural areas were not just washing their clothes in these machines, but were washing potatoes as well. So Haier adjusted the design of their washing machines in rural areas in China. You want to wash clothes? Sure, you can wash clothes. You want to wash potatoes? They're great for potatoes as well. So we've got these large-scale firms in developing countries, Embraer in Brazil, you can name it. The Mexican man who's got the telecoms company, Bharati Airtel, this fantastic distributed network, everything outsourced in India. We've got these large, vibrant firms. The ones that I'm really interested in are the ones that are below the radar. Not the large transnational themselves in developing countries, but these greedy capitalists in small towns, in rural towns, in India and China, who are doing things which don't qualify as innovation with a capital I because they got research and development. And you won't find them in a community innovation survey, but you'll find the Schumpeterian motor racing ahead with these people, and I'm going to argue later on that they are, I see some nodding heads, and most of the nodding heads I see are people who, by their looks at any rate, appear to come from developing countries, and recognize this phenomenon, which is unrecognized in our formal statistics, of the vibrancy of accumulation and marginal innovation occurring in these areas. So if we go back to that taxonomy earlier on, I would like to add to this because my colleagues at the OU have done really excellent work on this, public-private partnerships, which are new forms of innovation for public goods here, but I don't for the moment talk about that, and I'll come back to this sprue one later on when I give some examples. Public-private partnerships, I think of the Gates Foundation, malarial vaccines and whatever. Okay, so go back there, and we see two things happening. One is we see, I believe, this unrecognized drive of innovation occurring, usually unrecorded below the radar. And we see here this desperate search by transnational corporations to capture the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. I don't know how many of you read the piece by Immelt in the Harvard Business Review. Has everybody read it, or shall I tell you? Immelt is the man, you know shareholder value? The idea of shareholder value came from a man called Jack Welch, who ran General Electric, the largest manufacturing firm in America, for 15, 20 years. And many of the evils we see about financialization are really the pursuit of shareholder value. His job was taken by a man called Jack Immelt. 3 years ago, in 2009, Immelt wrote a piece in the Harvard Business Review with two of these managers, and he said, General Electric is changing our strategy. We are no longer innovating in the north and downgrading the innovations for developing countries. No, the market growth is in the developing countries. We are now going to locate the primary drive of our innovation activities in the south, and then we'll think about the use for the north. It's changed a bit because of the politics of outsourcing in America. General Electric are beginning to bring jobs back to America. But there's absolutely no question that the transnationals are seeing this market out there and going for it. The question is, are they able to grab it? And I would argue that and I'll give you perhaps one or two examples later on, the gold plating and the standards involved in value chains driven by northern TNCs makes it unlikely that they will achieve this market potential. Who was the Lin Soo Kim? Do you use the name ring a bell to you at all? There's a Korean who did some really pioneering work on innovation. And Lin Soo, terrible story, he took his dog for a walk on New Year's Eve in Korea. He must be about 57, 58, and he slipped on the ice and he hit his head and died. An enormous loss to the world of innovation studies. Lin Soo Kim describes how the Korean firms captured and dominated the market for microwave ovens in America. They sent engineers to live in American households for a year. So we'll pay you. Go and live in American households and just look at the consumption patterns, the way in which Americans operate. And this is a bit around the path dependency, the trajectory issue of these transnational corporations. They see the potential out there of these $4,000 or $5,000 households. Do they have the capacity to grab it? I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying that we're getting this rush here into this bottom right quadrant. So, having said all that, this was the SMEs, unrecorded, I would say, incidentally. Metaphorically, our perceptions of innovation of appropriate technology move from Schumacher. Appropriate technology is a good thing. It's, what did George Ackroyd wrote a book, not George Ackroyd, but Schumacher. In economics is if people mattered. Okay? That was the mantra, the Gandhian approach to appropriate technology. We're now talking about appropriate technology as a function of capitalist greed. That these technologies are now driven by the search for profit. It's not all good news. Not all good news. Here's a story, and I'll go briefly through it, of the timber value chain in Gabon. Gabon is the